My name's Levi, and I'm going to showcase my Soulrend build. I've got Path of Builder pulled up here, and we can take a look at the damage output and some of the items that I have. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. I'm more interested in showing what he was capable to do during boss fights. And so let's get into some of the skills. There's nothing incredibly different from some of the others. We use Soulrend, Awaken Affliction, Void Manipulation, Empower, Cruelty, and Awaken Control Destruction. For the chest piece, I used Ivory Tower versus Chevron's Wrappings. There are some pros and cons to that. I wanted to use that to obtain a higher energy shield count and be able to benefit more from reserving high amount of life. Anyways, without going any further into that, let's go ahead and get started. I had recorded these boss fights earlier, and so I'll go through and play the boss fights. I did the Exarch, regular, and Uber, Eater of Worlds, regular, Uber, Maven, regular, Uber, Sirus, regular, and Uber, and then Shaper, regular, and Uber, just to basically show how far the character had come from when I started earlier this league, and what is capable to do during regular fights and then Uber fights. And so I'll play them all the way through. You'll see every sad death along the way, but it should be a good time. And so I have posted in the description the link to my Path of Building, and you can also find me on POE Ninja under Delve Depth. I was in the experience category, but I only hit 99, and now they only have level 100s, and I have no desire to grind to level 100. And so anyways, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on the first fight. So the first one I start off with is just simply the regular Exarch. And so with regular Exarch, this was an easy fight overall. There wasn't a whole lot of complication to it. I believe it's actually already over. There we go. So right around here. So basically, regular Exarch, as you can see, gunning down the HP, no mechanics involved. Didn't have to put forth hardly any effort in any way, shape, or form. I used Molten Shell on self-cast to be able to time when I need to be able to put the resistances at max capacity there. And so that was the regular Exarch. Took a whopping sub 20 seconds to do in that particular fight. Now when we move on to the Uber Exarch, that one's going to be much more complicated. And so this fight here, when he does that ability, really have to dodge it, or I have to have Molten Shell up because it hits incredibly hard. And so this phase here, I did not survive a single ball phase along the way. I've only fought him a handful of times this season, and I've maybe survived the ball phase once out of about 5 tries for the Uber version. It's very difficult. I can eat a couple, as you can see. I did not have Molten Shell up, so I could only absorb maybe 2. With Molten Shell, I can eat a few, but I have a bad tendency to overcorrect. And so we'll watch this here. Obviously, I'm going to wait until that ball phase is done. And I forgot to put on my Ruby Flask when I first entered in. And so that would have made a tremendous difference on that first one. But surviving that ball phase on the Uber version is incredibly difficult without having max spell suppression and max fire resist. And so with Molten Shell up, as you can see, I can tank a lot of these abilities here. And so obviously run after the corner for the explosion or incineration portion. Then go back. I have Wither set to a totem, so I cast the totem. Very common for a Soulrend build. And then I used Bane with Temporal Chains and Despair. And I also have Arcane Surge attached to Temporal Chains, or attached to Bane. See, I feel like I almost made it there, then I run right into 2 and get killed again. It was a good time. It was definitely a little complicated. And once again, I've only survived it maybe a handful of times. But fortunately, I can gun them down in about 3 to 4 tries. And so just the only thing I really can't survive consistently is just that ball phase. And so moving along here, standing on the ground degens, not a big deal. It does allow you to take more damage. So if we can avoid it, we certainly will. I also use Enduring Cry for a quick burst heal if need be, but a lot of times I can't get it off. So I don't like this position here. I'm losing HP, and I just don't have any recovery at that point, and they're coming in from so many angles. I don't have the precision to be able to navigate that minefield. It is a complete disaster. But I'm able to go in this last time. I wait for the ball phase to expire, so fortunately you get the free 60 seconds when you walk into the portal, and we just wait for it to end. And then I'm going to dash over to him and put up my Wither Totem and hit him twice with Bane to activate the Arcane, and we're going to gun him down. And so some things I feel like I do well, avoiding the ball phase, not so well. If you don't have Molten Shell on self-cast when trying to fight someone, oh yeah, I die here to a ground defect because I got so focused at looking at him. I get murdered. This is not a good fight for me. Takes 5 portals for me to do it. I had test run it a couple days ago, and I was able to do it in 2. And one occasion I was able to do it in 1. As you can see, I almost gunned him down without having to use that 5th portal. But we were able to get the job done. And so moving on to the next fight, decided to do Eater of Worlds next. I wanted to get my least favorite fights out of the way first. So I kind of skipped ahead because he has such a short life expectancy. The DPS, I can't say it's incredibly high, but for Soulrend it's very high. Gunned him down. Once again, it's a sub 25 second fight on the regular version. And then we go straight into the Uber version, and the Uber version is definitely a little more complex. So the tentacles that come up out of the ground will hit very hard. They do a lot of damage, even if you have Molten Shell up. With Molten Shell, I can take a physical hit, max hit of about 110,000. And I time my Molten Shell with his Die Beam. So when he summons up the tentacles, for those who haven't done this fight before, you typically want to try to position yourself behind him. That way you can land some free shots in the back while the tentacles rise up and then slam into the ground. Obviously we're hitting the purple orbs here. I cast my Molten Shell while I'm running. I was able to dodge that one okay. This one I think I only had 1 death on this one. So tentacles come up, free shots in the back, and definitely want to flash out. If you're fast enough you can run out of the tentacles coming up, but you don't want to get hit by those. Depending on your build, it can one-shot you if it lands a lucky crit on you. Some could definitely take more than one. And that one, I didn't have my Molten Shell up in time for the Die Beam. Hence why the Die Beam did kill me that time. If I have Molten Shell up, the Die Beam cannot kill me, as far as I know. And so I've never seen it kill me when I have it fully healthy and complete and up. So back to the purple ball phase, you just simply run into the balls, cast Molten Shell because those slams will do a lot of damage. And so I don't cast Molten Shell until I have determined that one is going to land on top of me. Fortunately, Aegis Aurora was able to save me there. His Die Beam is so precise. It can be difficult to dodge because it's very good at tracking. I'm avoiding the drowning balls here, and yeah, that was an example of one of those tentacles coming up and clapping me. If it lands at the right critical strike, it can kill me. So I was able to dodge that one pretty well, and he's dead here. And so that was the end of this fight. Didn't get anything out of him. Played Eater of Worlds maybe 20 or 30 times, Uber version, this league, and there's never got any good loot out of him. I got better loot out of the Eternal Hunger than I did out of Eater of Worlds. Moving on, I move on to my next fight here. And so this is just regular Maven. Regular Maven, as you can see, gets gunned down pretty quick, especially once we get full wither stacks on him. Only have to deal with 1 set of orbs. Strategy there is, I'm sure if you've watched a lot of boss videos, you know how, or if you just played Maven, you know how to play Maven. Some people like to dump them in the middle. I typically prefer the corner. It's just easier to be more consistent with that position for me. Everybody has a preference, but you want to try and lead them all to the same corner. So mind game, no pressure on regular version. None. You just pay attention to the to the pie slices, as I call them. In this case, it's what I call around the horn. So you just go make 1 loop, complete around. So I'll even talk to myself out loud and say whether it's around the horn or if it's back and forth. And so sometimes it's around the horn with a reversal and then we're back and forth, or sometimes it's just constant back and forth. So just keep bouncing back and forth between 2 pie slices, and it's real quick and real easy. So here I cast my Spell Totem, and then I'll cast Double Bane to activate the Arcane Surge. You can get it set up to do it in a single Bane cast. I chose to do 2 because then I could up the level of Arcane Surge. I couldn't have it really above about level 8 throughout the entirety of the game, because anything above that required too much mana, because Bane was only a 25 mana skill. And so I didn't want to put Arcane Surge on my main ability. Why waste it there? I did use the Divergent Arcane Surge, which adds 2 seconds when at 20% quality. And so it goes from 4 to 2. And so that was quite helpful, and not having to constantly cast Bane. I am dodging the scissors maneuver there, only for habit and practice sake, not because I need to. On the regular version, I can tank it all day. I could stand in it, and it would never kill me. On the Uber version, it puts on a 10-second debuff, which prevents you from healing, as you'll see. And I'll get hit by it when I play the Uber version. I've gotten pretty decent about dodging it overall, but I've come up with a few different mechanics and methods to probably dodge it about 70% of the time if I'm playing well. And I have beaten Uber Maven deathless several occasions, but it can be challenging at times depending on what map bosses spawn. Some of them have some pretty rough spawns for me if I don't gun them down, but it's typically just best if you have the DPS to just gun down the Maven as quickly as you can. Except during the mind game phase, you want to try and kill them and not have to think about them while they're chasing you around. That fireball in this version, as you can see, I just stand there and basically just, I don't even know if he hit me there or if I split it. But he'll die here in the next few seconds. And that was regular Maven. Pretty easy fight, nothing special about that one. Moving on to the next one. Let's see here, about right there. Okay, so let's actually go back a little bit here. So for this one with the Barrage of Ice, I manually cast my Molten Shell to make sure that I can tank those shots, because that Ice Barrage will do a lot of damage. It hits very hard. Now if I block it, obviously it will provide me with a significant amount of healing. If I don't block it, it can potentially 2-shot me. And that's with 80 cold resist, and as you can see, a little less than 8,000 effective hit points. Well, I say effective, but 8,000 energy shield and life combined. So here I cast Molten Shell, and I can pretty much stand there and tank the Maven at this point. And then we play the mind game. I set up the Wither Totem and consistently just try and focus and gun down the bosses to get them out of the way. They typically only spawn 2. I see it's an around the horn, so this one should be easy, but I kill him first before making the move on this first one, just to make the run easy. Then that way when the Maven comes down, I can focus my attention here. So, pretty sure almost everybody has played Uber Maven. I say everybody. Most people have. If you haven't, on Uber Maven, another big difference is those balls that follow you around that create the ground degen don't go away in between the phases. And so it's important to try and continually drop them in the same spot. And she has much more HP, and so it's very important to try to lead them to the same location. I barely missed that fireball. That almost wiped me out. And so I got hit yet again there, but I was able to make a block. And Maven is down for the second portion of moving on to round 2 of this particular fight. Once again, Spell Totem, same maneuver, try and get on the opposite side, double cast Bane, start attacking right now, and then once the map bosses come in, cast Molten Shell. My Molten Shell will be up for about 7.14 seconds. Maybe a little too precise, but that's pretty much what it should be. So now round 2 of the mind game. I think I botched this one. So it starts top, it's a back and forth with around the horn and then a reversal, and I screw it up. I go here and then I go, yep. They go up, I panicked and I went down, and then I blow myself up. Good times. I had gotten distracted attacking those bosses, and if you miss one little tick, unless you get lucky, it throws off the whole game. And so my daughter came in at this point and started talking to me, and so had a little bit of an interruption there. And so we'll move forward until I'm back in. So anyways, lead those balls to the old poop spot there. I did get hit with the debuff, so it prevented me from healing. And so hence why I cast Molten Shell to keep that up. Now this is a free damage spot right here since I was able to get in. That I messed up one of the ground degens there, and it hit me right as I was trying to get away from them. But that fireball you don't want to hit. It is a shotgun blast. It does a ton of damage. If you get hit by one, you're likely to get hit by multiple. And that ground slam also does a lot of damage. And so you don't want to stand in that. I can't remember if I think this one's just back and forths. Yeah, this one's back and forth, and he's already pretty injured, so I'm able to gun him down here pretty quick. Right over here, clean him up, then I lead these. Try to lead them outside the circle, but I get caught here and try to flash, and basically got them outside of the ring. So back in for round 3. Move to the other side because I don't like this spot of the ground degen on this particular spot. And once it really gets going and you start getting the wither stacks up, the damage picks up significantly. And now here's the last portion. And so this part can be difficult because you have to dodge 2 forms of debuffs. You have to dodge the oscillating beams here, and then you have to dodge the scissor maneuver. And it's very precise, and depending on where you're positioned, it can be kind of hard or difficult to dodge. But overall, it's really not that bad. And this part's a little more relaxed because there's nothing chasing you down. You don't have to worry about any degen balls following you or any map bosses. You can just simply focus in the mind game. I cast Molten Shell preemptively because for some reason the Maven's auto attack can hit you for about 6,000 to 7,000 damage in a hit, which for an auto attack is a lot. And so round 3 Maven's very strong, and I basically am just avoiding various forms of attacks at this point. So trying to get to the Maven can be a bit problematic, and so you always utilize that flash. Use that flash as often as you can to get out of dicey scenarios. If you can time it right, as I did there, you're able to just simply flash right out of the way. And I wasn't able to kill her before she goes back into the mind game, so I have to endure one more mind game before completing this fight here. Looky there, this one's pretty straightforward. It's a back and forth with an around the horn and a back and forth. My terminology, that one I strictly made up. So a lot of things I steal other people's ideas or words for, but for that one's all me. Yeah, avoid the ground slam, and that was the Uber Maven. I had one death. That was distinctively my fault. I screwed that one up. And so I can oftentimes fight Uber Maven flawlessly, unlike the Uber Exarch. And moving on from there. So this one is Sirus regular version. Sirus regular version he's easy, especially for where I was at this point in the league. I have, oh boy, I'm standing on ground degens and barely taking any damage, especially with Molten Shell up, and I phase him within a matter of 4 to 6 seconds, somewhere in that realm. And so he's pretty straightforward. It felt good because in previous seasons, Sirus would be the bane of my existence. I love bossing. Bossing is probably one of my favorite things to do. It's what I strive for when I play Path of Exile. Some people love mapping, some people love delving, some people love bossing, some people love a little bit of everything. I am strictly I don't want to say strictly a bosser. Like, I do set it up to be able to run maps at an efficient pace, but predominantly bossing's my favorite thing to do. And so having regular Cyrus come down and be able to smack him felt really, really good to be able to take vengeance on him. As you can see, it starts off a little slow, then as it charges up, you can see that damage really pick up. And of course we have the meteor game on this one. It's so slow compared to what it is on the Uber version. So I just stand here in the middle of the beam. I have Molten Shell up. He cast it, does virtually no damage, and bye-bye, buddy. And he drops an Orb of Dominance. Of course, the non-Uber version drops the Orb of Dominance for me. Plus Crusader Gloves, which are worth 40, 45 Chaos Uncorrupted. Moving on to the Uber version. So Uber version is, let's actually go back a little bit. Let's go back a little bit. So Uber version is quite a bit different from the perspective of during his phases. Not only does he have over 100% more life, during each of the beginning phases, the first 3 phases, there's a storm that populates in the middle. It's not difficult to avoid, but you don't want to get pinched by it. And especially if you're a melee character or a character that has to stay close to him, you really don't want that storm moving in your direction, and you kind of get caught in between things. I've gotten a pretty good habit of casting Molten Shell when needed. And so I used to have it only on cast when damage taken. But if you have to take 3,500 damage, there are things that can potentially one-clap you and so, before you'd even get an opportunity to use it. And so I've gotten to the point where, especially for bossing and even mapping, if I know I'm running into a big map, I'll preemptively cast it, especially since it lasts 7 seconds for me. And so you want to get out of a lot of this stuff. Biggest weakness for using Ivory Tower versus something like Chevron Trapping was chaos damage. Without any buffs on, without Molten Shell or Val Molten Shell, max chaos hit taken is about 5,900 damage. Now fortunately there's not a whole lot of things in the game that do that much, and once I kind of broke the 5,000 threshold, for a while I was sitting sub 4,000, 3,500. And there are a few things in the game that can hit you for 4,000 chaos damage in a single hit, specifically. So I got knocked out of the circle. Then I had to damage them. The shockwave knocked me out, and so I had to redo that one. So that was kind of a pain. But moving back here, typically when you're fighting him, don't mean to get sidetracked, but typically when you're fighting him, you want to try and stay on the left side or the bottom side, because that's where Sirus will typically sit. And then that way, when the storm will move out of the way, you can get underneath him and be able to get him to come down from his elevated position. But if you're on the right side or the top side, the storm kind of fluctuates in a funny point, and so it's hard to get close to him, as you can see. I almost sold that ruby flask, and I never did, but this is the last time I'm playing Path. Earlier today was the last time I was playing Path for the season. And so at this point I didn't really care anymore. It will sit in my inventory forever. So I did, I was able to trigger him and did get him to come down. As you can see, I lost a lot of mana there. I almost died. I believe I do get killed coming up here. I'm dodging a lot of abilities. The way I get killed is I get killed by the meteor maze. I went the wrong way. When it comes to the third one, it comes on very quickly. So anyways, triggered him for the 3rd time. He goes back up. This time I'm able to kind of hover left side and stay in the left side. So I stay here, wait for the storm to move out of the way. As you can see, it moves out of the way a little faster. If you're on the top side or the right side, it takes a little bit more time to do it. A tidbit, when I first fought him, his die beam, I could not tank it, even with Molten Shell. I didn't have the survivability. It was too difficult in that regard. Even when I got the damage, it was still tough. So what I was able to do to beat him is, when this phase happens here, you run off screen. You run very far off screen. You run far enough off screen that he can't attack you. I needed to go... No, this is the one I get out of. It's one of the next ones that I die. And so at this point here, he's casting his, triangle of death, or star of death, as I should say. I tank the die beam by having Molten Shell up. And get close to him, try and keep a close proximity. And so I showcased here, I'm like, if you have to run away, you can run up here and run into a spot, it won't hit you. That die beam was a second die beam, to be fair. That wasn't from the void. I went the wrong way. I needed to go up, I go down, I don't make it out, and I get killed. I have survived the third ring before. That was a bit of a fluke, that I went the wrong way twice. That doesn't happen very often. Reactivating all my R's. If you have every R set to a hotkey and you're watching this, you're like, that is painful to watch. Why is he manually doing each one? I apologize in advance. And so, moving to the middle, and then I believe from here we have a pretty clean sweep at this point. Only one death against him, and took me going the wrong way twice to botch that. And so I know I can stay, as long as I don't get hit by the star degen, I can put up Molten Shell. Flame Dash is a must when fighting the majority of bosses. You can use Shield Charge, but you want to be able to actually get past a lot of degens without. So this time I was able to make my way out okay. He's got a lot of degens in the ground. He's a pain in the butt early on until you get appropriate tanking. And I almost died there as I lost a lot of my mana. And so he's casting that, and he's done. That is Uber Cyrus. A great time, loads of fun. I'm taking an hour and a half worth of gameplay, and I'm trying to condense it down. I was originally going to upload the entire video, but nobody watches an hour and a half video, and likelihood is nobody's going to watch this one either. But you know what? I want to remember these fights. I loved this build. It was a great deal of fun, and I want to be able to go back sometimes and be able to show what this character is able to do. So here's Uber Shaper, Uber Maven. No, Uber Maven. Uber Shaper, Uber Elder. I hope if I get the bosses right. This one isn't really all that bad. This one I did Deathless. It can be a more difficult to fight. The ground slam for Uber Shaper is substantial. It's big. That tri-ball that seems to do no damage. If it hits you, it does a significant amount of damage. And so for some reason I have no dodge ability or no evade, and it doesn't do any damage. It might be due to the block. I've got pretty high block chance. But if at all possible, you want to try to avoid those as much as possible. If I know I'm going to be tanking, or if it's coming my direction, see, that was one of those orbs hitting me. Took away about 5,000 HP or 5,000 energy shield there. And so I try and cast Molten Shell if I know I'm going to have to run through them or run between them. So this, when the Elder does that circle, it is roughly an 8 count and you're safe. If you count to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you'll stay outside of the circle. You don't want to be in the middle because you don't want to limit that ground to move to when the time comes. So I should have a good opportunity to be able to explain that and showcase that here. Hanging off to the right is typically a good place to be when it comes to trying to avoid the chaos phase. So when he goes in the orb, it's a great opportunity to get him down. Fortunately, the Elder's tri-shot of ice is not very strong. It can do a lot of damage if it hits you, but the likelihood of all 3 hitting you is pretty slim, at least for the way that I built my character. So even with a single Soulrend shot, I'll periodically cast Bane. I think you should see it here in just a moment to be able to get my Arcane Surge up. But I think I'm just in full-blown survival mode at this point. Yeah, as I almost get hit there. And I cast my Enduring Cry to be able to get more energy shield back. I had some very close calls here. That's why Flame Dash or some kind of dash is very important. This ground slam by the Elder, not that big of a deal. I see that Shaper is moving into his Chaos phase. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I actually went up there early, and you can see, and I moved, and I was able to get right back in the nick of time. I was cutting it close. And so cast Enduring Cry again. Felt good to be able to do some of these fights flawlessly. Once again, the fights that I don't do flawlessly is just, it's not because the character's incapable of doing it, it's because I'm incapable of doing it. And so that ice twirl, we know that right after that, immediately after that, Elder will do a ground slam that can hit incredibly hard. I can oftentimes tank it, but if you've taken a little bit of damage and then get hit by that, it can definitely kill you. Yeah, and so nothing good there. That steel ring was not good. None of that other gear is good either. So moving on to the next fight. So the next one is regular Shaper. Why regular Shaper? Because he's a crappy long fight where you have to fight 4 map bosses, and then you can fight them in multiple phases, and it's just, even if you do a lot of damage, I think the fastest builds can maybe do it in 3 to 4 minutes. Depending on what map boss is and how many phases I had to endure, such as this one, I could do it in an average of 5.5 to 7. 7 minutes if it's not the regular, the Uber version. 7 minutes if it's a multi-phase map boss, which is just downright obnoxious. This one's Piety. And so this one's easy. As you can see, kill map bosses 83 in a matter of seconds. I really enjoyed Soulrend. I thought I was going to cap out around 3.5 to 4.5 million damage, and I'm thinking there's no way I'm going to go higher. And you just keep digging, and you just keep looking for ways to be creative. I wanted to see if I could tank the dive beam, so that was me trolling more than anything. It's amazing how small the AoE is on the regular version of Shaper. And so that was just kind of seeing what kind of damage can be taken from the dive beam. It does a pretty substantial amount, but you can stay in it for several seconds, as you can see. And I mean, phases like this, kind of pointless phases, boring phases, and then he sends you to the map. I would utilize Bane typically, because my Bane will one-shot. I didn't even have any investment in Bane. That was a 4-link with two curses and Arcane Surge. But I'd use Bane because it's a bigger AoE. When I was mapping, I'd use Greater Multiple Projectiles. And I just one-shot everything, even most rares, regardless of what mods are on the map. It did a substantial amount of damage. It was a lot of fun. But I use Bane because it's more instantaneous, kind of a bigger AoE, and it's more likely to clear the path. And I'm only really casting it on those guys because I had a percentage chance of my boots to obtain Onslaught. And so that makes boots, unfortunately, a lot more expensive. But this whole build, the majority of it was in the belt, which is Mage's Blood, of course. An amazing belt, a lot of fun. I've never used it before. I did not play when it first came out. And so it was a great deal of fun. The armor piece, Ivory Tower, the armor that I wanted didn't exist. And so I was looking for 2 implicits. And it could have been AoE, duration, projectiles, plus 1 to socketed gems. And there was just nothing out there for the longest time. There was an armor that popped up. The guy was asking 80-something exalts for it. And I was in the process of saving for it, and then it disappeared. So I imagined it sold. And so I was like, well, the most definitive way to obtain more damage at this point is I'm going to have to do temple runs myself. 26 temple runs later to even get one that was suitable. And it's not like, Soulrend doesn't have a lot of options. Once again, you can do AoE, you can do projectiles, you can do duration, and you can do +1 to socketed skills. So you can get a plethora of options there. You have 4 different options that can be mixed, matched in any way, shape, or form to be able to make it work, because I'm using Empower. And so an Empower, sending that up a level, certainly would make up for the additional level needed. And so 26 temple runs and 26 ivory towers. Fortunately, I just bought decent ivory towers for 3 to 5 chaos with decent stats on them. I would not 6-link them beforehand. That would have been ungodly expensive. It'd be better to buy. It was better to buy, 6 exalts worth of Val orbs. Unfortunately, I had enough orbs of fusion to be able to do it by the time it actually came around. But yeah, 26 temple runs, a lot of poofs, a lot of bricks, It was not my idea of a good time. Alright, so he's done. Moving on to the Uber version. So this boss kind of sucks when he casts that beam on you. It seems to go right through the molten shell. But if I cast Enduring Cry during it, it never lasts long enough. And I kill him faster than he typically kills me anyways. These bosses here, these are the 85s. And so you can see once it really gets charged up, and he's done. It's a good time. Cast Molten Shell, lasts an eternity. With increased duration, Vow Molten Shell lasts almost 21 seconds. And when I was sitting on 70,000 armor, have a 21,000 hit point buffer for 21 seconds. Kind of nice how those two coincided there. Alright, dancing around here. Typically, so the strategy that I would use to start off, just little things. Cast the spell totem on the opposite side, because you don't want him to cast his spells on you and destroy it immediately. So if he casts it on you, it misses. Now, granted, his shadows helped out. Now he's got the tri-beam. His AoE is substantial. You don't want to get hit by it. Best spot to typically stand is where I'm standing right now, on average. I'd say it's 60-70% of the time you can stand in that spot, and if you're a little evasive, you can avoid all those projectiles. Now there are times where it's an unlucky spot and he portals very nearby multiple times, and there's so many projectiles. You have to have a molten shell and you have to be able to take a hit, or you have to have some sort of guard up during that process. I went the wrong way in this one a few times. I hate this layout here. This layout is obnoxious. You'd think that after playing Shaper 30 times in a row that I would have it down, but unfortunately I don't. I was thinking it was zigzag, which is what it typically is, but it was kind of straight line, and it was a little more unpredictable. So because I'd gone right, I'm thinking, okay, I'll go left. No, one's right, and then go straight, and then go right again, and go straight, and then go right again, and so yeah, I keep thinking it's supposed to go left, and that's why it's still not left. You're like, what is this? Run into a jail cell. What is this idiot doing here? Gosh, what a moron. Who plays like this? There we go. Make the long flash. Good job. Good job. You did something right. Running into random jail cells again. But, yeah, little things about totem placement to try and get the totem to last a little bit longer. You want to try and cast it opposite side of you, because that way, if it's attacking you, it doesn't get destroyed. If he decides to turn around and go after your totem, then there's less time spent attacking you. And so it doesn't take long, even with decreased speed on it. It still is applying roughly 3 stacks a second, plus these stacks that I apply through just my mere presence. And so, so you can see there, dodge out of the way for that. Just a typical Shaper fight, nothing spectacular. I activate those balls to keep them away from me because I don't want my little special corner blocked up. So you see here, I cast Molten Shell. I didn't need to. I was able to get through it okay. Flash away. Now he casts his clones. His clones are just obnoxious little creatures. But if you're firing about 2 shots a second, you can fire 2 to 3 and then run. Fire 2 to 3 and then run. Fire 2 to 3 then run. If he's got his clones up, it may kind of mess up the timing a little bit. But there's a good timing, a good cadence you can adhere to when you're trying to do this. 2 attacks a second felt pretty good. Sub that, it's a little on the slow side. It's not bad, but it is nice to get a couple more cast in there. The Swift Affliction, while reducing the time for the DOT, is not necessarily a good thing. If you have a slower attack speed, it's not a bad thing to have the damage applied over a longer period of time. But with temporal chains and increasing the duration of DOTs, if I remember correctly, that's how that works, really helps out in putting it back up to about 1 second for the DOT, a little bit more than 1. Because originally, with Swift Affliction on, it's about 0.6.5, 0.7, somewhere in that realm. If you hit them with temporal chains, with the Bane with temporal chains. See, like, this position here worked out great, minus that hit there. Yep. Oh, I did die to him. Gosh dang it. I forgot about that death. And so, that one can be a bit of a fluke. But, yeah. moving back into the fight here. He got lucky. I messed up. I'm like, I'm not going to mess up again, I swear. I mean, even a maneuver like that is risky. Moving towards the spreading dry balls can be a real ballsy play because it sets you up to potentially get clapped by not just one, but 2 or 3 of them. So this is where he sets himself up to die, and I clean him up. Orb of Dominance. Nice work. Moving on to the next fight here. Ah, this one's easy. This here we're gonna start this one over. This one's just the regular Elder here. Eldar. Alright, so we're gonna activate this fight. We're gonna go in and non-Uber bosses, and Elder's the easiest one. He's only got like 40 something million HP. And 2, 3, 4, call it like 5 seconds. And he's phased. Yeah, I think I was maybe counting a little on the fast side. I normally take in greater multiple projectiles on this one with me, and I'll swap them out right at this phase. Just to make life easy, you can stand there, the spread's wide enough, and guns down both of them at the same time. Makes life a lot easier, totally forgetting that I had put it in my stash. And so, good times. And I think I actually gave away my Awakened Swift Affliction unintentionally and all my currency at the end of this. End of each league, I typically, I don't donate my gear because I've got friends and, you know, my brother who plays a significant amount as well. And I play a lot more than he does, surprisingly enough. And so I have the really nice gear, so I don't want to give it away because there's times where he wants to try it out and use it. But my currency at the end of each league, whatever main currency I have left, I'll give it away. I had met a young guy from, I say met, met a young guy, met a kid from Denmark. I think this is his first league playing, and he was trying out a Righteous Fire and then moved into a Bladefall build. And he was really enjoying the game, still had a lot to learn about it and how to put things together. Had only made a whopping 10-something exalts this whole season so far. And so I gave him all of my remaining currency. And it's nothing special. I do it at the end of each league because what am I going to do with it? Absolutely nothing. It's going to sit in my inventory for all of eternity. And then the billionaires of Path of Exile and Standard League can go on crafting for millennia, making the most robust items. Moving on to the next one. Yeah, this one's Uber Tsiri. So I did have greater multiple projectiles on this one. Because with the clones and just the way that map's laid out, it's best just to hit them all at the same time. I don't think I moved off greater multiple projectiles for the remainder of the time. DPS, a single target, drops from about 10.2 down to about 7.1. With Hinder and then 15 stacks of Wither, which once again happens pretty quickly. Uber Tsiri, can't remember, I think she may have killed me once. Always set up a portal here. Her Flame Blast on the ground, she has 3 different attacks on the ground, AoE stuff, that can just hit like a truck. So I'm doing Uber Tsiri to demonstrate a feared fight. I think my daughter asked me a question at this particular moment in time. Let's see here. Oh yeah, I think I stepped away. Okay, there we go. Wait, did I win? Oh yeah, too fast. Okay. And so like this phase here, very lethal. You need to dash out of those ground circles, those flame circles, those novas, whatever you want to call them. They're not good for your health. They're very, very bad. And so was able to gun her down. Don't think I died once. We'll see by the portals. Nope, didn't die against her. Sometimes she can land a lucky ground shot on me, but that time she did not. Who's next? Ah, the Cortex. Yeah, so this is Uber Cortex. Uber Cortex can most certainly kill me. Uber Cortex has some very big hits. The Pull of the Void, along with some other attacks. If you are unlucky and get hit with a couple ground degens, experience a bit of lag there. This map is kind of goofy on the PC, just because of all the weird effects. But yeah, Uber Cortex has some pretty unique abilities that can be dangerous. Best thing I can say during this fight is don't stand still very long. Stay mobile. Keep your molten shell up, or keep your defensive guard up as much as possible. I'm just checking around to see if there's any decent looking synthesized items on the ground, and there's not. Clear this area out. Check over here. Look at that. Nope. Reduce reflected damage. No, nobody cares about that. Maybe somebody does, but nobody I know of. And so, putting back some of my auras on, switching to Awaken Swift Affliction, need the damage. I mean, you could use GMP in this fight because at the middle phase, there are 2 targets at all times. It wouldn't be a bad thing to gun them both down simultaneously, not really have to aim it. And there's a phase where there's a lot of ads that come out. But overall, not too bad. Once again, biggest thing I learned with this fight, the first time I fought him, I lost. I didn't have the damage I do now, nor the survivability, but first time I fought Uber Cortex, I did lose. I was not moving around as much. I was overconfident in my DPS output and my survivability, and I wasn't manually casting my guards as well, which that's made a big difference. I mean, if you have the micro to be able to do it, and talk about a guy who has virtually no micro capability. I can hit the W key and the Q key, and then left and right click, and that's pretty much the extent of it. Anything beyond that, I can periodically hit a couple other buttons with some level of precision, but not. It's not very precise. So I want to stay out of a lot of anything that looks like a circle AOE ability. Just avoid it. I mean, that's just a general rule of thumb for most things. I got sucked into some nonsense there. Took some damage. I mean, the ground effects here are just substantial, so it really limits your walking space. And there's a lot of damage here. And so, want to gun him down. He almost kills me. Cast my Enduring Cry, and I clean him up. Now we're to the ad phase. The ad phase, even on this phase, stay mobile, because there's a lot of abilities that are happening and occurring all at once that if you try and hop into one position, unless you're very tanky, likely you're not going to survive. There's a handful of builds out there that are so tanky, or if you just have the DPS to just insta-wipe everything on the screen. Cranked up to 10 million DPS is not enough. Base DPS of about 4.8 million Sirus damage before being fully juiced to 15 stacks, not enough. So you see that did some pretty good damage there. I'm standing there for a moment because I saw that they were busy doing some sort of nonsensical attack. This one here, move off the ground degen. Fortunately I was able to block that and regain some life. Cast Molten Shell to get close. If he's distracted, I'm going to stand there and cast a couple shots. But overall, that was a bad cast. Overall, it's keep moving as best you can. As soon as you take the slightest amount of damage, you got to get rolling. I was able to clean him up, clean this guy up. Did not get Bottled Faith. Didn't get anything good at all from him. Moving on to one of the last fights here. Okay, so this is Chayula. Chayula, I'm an idiot. I stand there and I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and try and tank his Whirlwind on a pure Chayula Breachstone and just stand there and try and DPS him down. I almost killed him. So I stand there, and if I was using Awakened Swift Affliction, he'd be dead by now, and I would not have died. But he kills me here, right there. Or maybe if I used, some mechanical skill level, would have been able to avoid that death. As you can see, I was smiling for a moment there. Go back in. It's like, okay, I deserve that. I'm an idiot. Cast the spell. Where is he? I don't know which one's the real one. There he is. Blessing of Chayula and a simple robe. Nothing spectacular. Now for the showcase and final piece, we're going to do the Feared. Feared is dead. Okay. Nope. Okay. Feared. So I do have them all releasing at the same time. It was I do have Height of the Hubris on. I only picked about a 60-ish% without Height of Hubris, so about 120-ish% with it. And all of them being released at the same time. I typically avoid anything that's increased life. If you have a higher DPS build, that may not be a concern, but I don't need them having 70% more HP in conjunction with moving 60 to 80% faster and attacking 50 to 60% faster. And so I avoid life. And so I rolled it to a point where there's a set of mods that I felt comfortable enough doing. First time I fought the Feared, I did them 2 at a time. I made the mistake of activating all 5 at once earlier in the season and got clapped. Good times. I've significantly increased my strength output in both durability and offensively. And so I was able to do this fight with minimal difficulty. I say minimal. There were some close calls. They have increased projectiles, increased attack speed, increased movement speed, along with some other abilities on there as well. So you can see I was taking a hit, so I cast Elder's already casting the Circle of Doom. So I was able to get in there. I was able to get a couple lucky blocks in. No talent of mine. That was sheer luck. I should have been killed, quite frankly. Aegis Aurora saved my ass. And I'm running around the outside perimeter. Look how many ground effects Uber-Tyria is casting. But I'm running around the center, trying to keep Molten Shell up as long as possible. As you can see, I have my Val Molten Shell up. 22,400 additional hit points. Now, granted, it's only at 40%. And I'm just casting across the middle and trying to keep Bane up as well. And that's when I realized, oh, they're all dead, except for the Cortex. And so this is the last fight here. And I stand there and just face tank him, and that was pretty much the end of my season. Nothing good dropped. Of course, got 16 Crescent Splendors and Orb of Conflict. That Sulfur Flask is not anything good. Wasn't worried about most of the rest of the gear. And yeah, that was it. I don't think you need to see me give away 60 Exalts worth of currency. And so yeah, it was a good league. It started off it was pretty difficult. It was the first time I played since Arch Nemesis, and that did make some of the rare monsters a bit of a challenge early on. When I first started this build, I had 0 armor and 0 evasion. I was going off of solely block chance. I was not using Aegis Aurora. I was not using Mage Blood. I beat all the regular bosses with a sub 15 Exalt investment. And if it weren't for the armor piece being 6 Exalts to get a 6 link of Ivory Tower early in the season, it would have been the sub 8. I mean, by the end, you could get a 6-link Ivory Tower for 2. So, I mean, if we go by those metrics, I spent, yeah, as I say, around maybe 8 to 10 instead of 12 to 15. Just had a lot of Energy Shield, had a lot of DOT, and some Cluster Jewels to really help that out. I'm going to post in the description a link to the Path of Builder for anyone who wants to check it out. I love just taking bad skills and just trying to see if they can be utilized. Now, it's hard to say that Soulrend is truly a bad skill. I don't think it's a bad skill. It's just an underwhelming skill for how much investment. All said and done, I mean, you know that Mage Blood's 180 Exalts. My armor, if you had to buy it, the only one that was out there was 200, but I'm not going to go with that. I think it's realistically worth. I invested 30 Exalts into it just in temple runs, basically, plus Val Orbs, plus Orbs of Fusing. So, yeah, I mean, so that's bumps it up to about, what, 215. It wasn't until the very end that I finally got an Aegis Aurora. I was using a titanium shield with just a lot of energy shield. I was using Crown of the Inward Eye for additional damage and more survivability. And that's 80 Chaos. For the longest time, the most expensive pieces I had was my chest piece and my belt. I eventually added about a 50-ish Exalt Wand, which was the best thing I could find that was a step down from a mirror. And so I don't have any desire to farm that much. I got a good AMI towards the end. I was able to add frenzy charges, so I was running trip frenzy charges the entire time at the very end, but it wasn't until the last couple weeks that I got that. Some of my rings were only worth maybe 20 chaos. My gloves were originally maybe 100 chaos to an exalt and a half, somewhere in that realm, depending on when they were bought in the season. I finally broke down and bought an 8th exalt pair. The boots, for the longest time, I picked up for like an exalt. I had added some good implicits through either the World and Exarch mods. And then I finally broke down and bought a 25 exalt pair of boots that had a lot more energy shield, and then added the onslaught, which helped with mapping, and I mean, depending on the boss, even helped with some bossing. But yeah, I broke down and I used an Aegis Aurora. I went the longest time without melding of the flesh. I wanted to see if I could do it, and I could. I was able to do all content without melding of the flesh, and it was just a little more difficult. I didn't have any purities running, and so melding of the flesh capped at 80, but the difference between 75 and 80 is pretty substantial, and I figured that was worthwhile. Aegis Aurora did that without Aegis Aurora for a long time, and still did very well. Aegis Aurora was not a necessity. It was just kind of a nice quality of life. So I kind of went with the stereotypical gear in the end, and yeah, I mean, it was still fun. It was a lot of fun. It was a one heck of a journey. I loved every bit of it, and but I've played more. It's not hours, it's days, and it's not days, it's weeks. Than I care to admit. But yeah, it was a good time, and as a result of that, I'm probably going to take 2 seasons off, and then I've decided I'm going to come back and do a rolling magma build, which is a joke, and I want to see if I can maybe crack with a single cast maybe 30 to 40 million damage. I want to see if I can insta-phase certain bosses, even if it's just the regular version, and maybe fire 2 casts to, phase some of the top tier bosses. And I think that'll be a good time. I'll put forth the energy and effort to do such a thing. But yeah, if you're watching this, if you're one of the 2 people on planet Earth that decide to